The chandeliers of the Grand Astoria ballroom dripped light, scattering crystalline fragments across a sea of tailored tuxedos and couture gowns. It was a room suffocating in its own opulence, where fortunes were whispered into existence between sips of vintage champagne, and influence was traded with the subtle currency of a shared glance. This was the legacy of Hope Gala, the glittering apex of New York's philanthropic season. And tonight, it was meant to be Alara Vance's coronation. She stood just off stage, the fabric of her simple, elegant midnight blue dress, a stark contrast to the sequins and silks that surrounded her. At 32, she possessed a stillness that was often mistaken for aloofness. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe knot, emphasizing the sharp intelligence in her gray eyes, eyes that saw the world not as it was, but as a system of interconnected nodes, a complex architecture of code and human desire that could be understood, and, if necessary, rewritten. Tonight, she was being honored with the Foundation's Innovator of the Year award. The honor was for Aura, her life's work. It was a philanthropic platform unlike any other, an AI-driven logistical network that could direct charitable resources, food, medicine, shelter to crisis zones with unparalleled speed and efficiency. It eliminated fraud, bypassed corrupt middlemen, and ensured that a dollar donated in New York became a meal delivered in a flooded village in less than 12 hours. Aura was her proof that technology could have a soul. And now, the host's voice boomed from the stage, amplified to an almost reverent hush. A woman whose vision is reshaping the very definition of humanitarian aid. Her platform, Aura, has already changed millions of lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the recipient of this year's Innovator of the Year award, Ms. Alara Vance. A wave of polite, percussive applause washed over her as she walked into the spotlight. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, unscheduled process in the otherwise perfectly ordered system of her body. This was it. This was the validation she had worked for. The public acknowledgement that would finally wash away the lingering stains of the past. She stepped up to the podium. The warmth of the lights, a comforting pressure on her skin. Behind her, 3 massive LED screens displayed the Aura interface, a beautiful, dynamic map of the world, glowing with points of light representing active aid deliveries. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Thank you to the Foundation, and to everyone here tonight who believes, as I do, that compassion is not enough. True change requires compassion, married to efficiency. It requires a system." She paused. On the screens behind her, something was wrong. A single point of light on the world map, a delivery in East Africa, flickered, then another, then a dozen more. A nervous murmur, like the rustling of dry leaves, rippled through the audience. Alara's trained eyes saw it before anyone else understood. It wasn't a glitch. It was a cascade failure. The glowing blue dots representing successful deliveries began to turn a violent, accusatory red. The clean data streams showing funds received and aid distributed twisted into nonsensical strings of error codes. The map of the world, once a testament to hope, was now bleeding digital crimson. "It appears we're experiencing a minor technical issue," Alara said, her voice betraying none of the cold dread coiling in her stomach. She knew this code. She had written every line of it. This wasn't a random bug. This was a violation, an attack. Then the numbers appeared. On the central screen, replacing the dying world map, a ledger materialized. It showed millions of dollars being rerouted from the charity's accounts, not to aid organizations, but to a series of offshore shell corporations. The final destination was a single, newly created account, The name on the account was displayed in bold. Stark white letters, E. Vance. A collective gasp sucked the air from the ballroom. The murmurs sharpened, transforming into the sound of knives being unsheathed. On the screen, her life's work was not just failing. It was actively, demonstrably, accusing her of being a thief. She was being framed for embezzling millions from the very charity that was honoring her. Her eyes scanned the crowd, the sea of shocked and horrified faces, and found him, Julian Thorne. He stood near the front, a perfect picture of concerned sympathy. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his custom suit tailored to perfection. He met her gaze, and for a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. Beneath the feigned dismay was a glint of pure, triumphant ice. He lifted his champagne flute in a barely perceptible gesture, a toast to her destruction. The humiliation was a physical force, pressing in on her, trying to crush her. But as the cameras flashed and the first whispers of fraud and scandal reached the stage, Alara Vance did not cry. She did not rage. She did not even flinch. She simply stood at the podium, her back straight, her expression a mask of unnerving calm. Her mind, already racing past the shock, was processing the attack vector, the signature of the code, the sheer audacity of the execution. This was Julian's work. It had the same brutal elegance as his first betrayal, the one that had left her ostracized and alone years ago. He had stolen her work then. Now, he was stealing her name, her reputation, her very soul, and he was doing it in front of the whole world. The audience saw a woman ruined. But Julian, if he was watching closely enough, would have seen something else in her eyes. Not fear, not despair. It was the cold, quiet click of a switch, the activation of a system that had lain dormant for a very long time. As the gala security team began moving toward the stage, she leaned into the microphone one last time, her voice a calm, clear whisper that carried across the chaos. "The system has been compromised," she said, her words directed not at the audience, but at the man who had just declared war. "But every system has a flaw, and I will find it." The aftermath was a clinical dissection of her life. The world didn't just turn on her, it methodically stripped her of everything she had built. The media descended like vultures, their headlines screaming variations of the same theme, tech angels halo tarnished. Vance Charity, a billion-dollar fraud. Humanitarian hero, or high-tech grifter. Her photo was everywhere. The composed, almost serene face at the podium, juxtaposed with screenshots of the damning financial ledger. Her calm was interpreted as the icy nerve of a sociopath. Her company, Aura Innovations, was dead within a week. The board, terrified of legal repercussions, forced her resignation and initiated bankruptcy proceedings. Her assets were frozen, pending a federal investigation. Employees she had mentored, people whose careers she had championed, crossed the street to avoid her. The silence from her phone was heavier than any accusation. She retreated to her minimalist apartment, a glass box overlooking a city that now felt alien and hostile. For 3 days, she did not sleep. She lived on black coffee and the cold fury that had settled deep in her bones. The gala wasn't just a corporate attack. It was a deeply personal message from Julian, a final, definitive severing of their shared history. Her mind kept drifting back, unbidden, to a university lab a decade ago. It was a place that smelled of ozone and stale pizza, a chaotic sanctuary where she and Julian had been inseparable. They were the stars of the computer science department, she, the prodigy of pure code, a restless genius who saw solutions others couldn't even imagine. He, the visionary, the charming strategist who could package her complex ideas into world-changing narratives. They were two halves of a single, brilliant mind. Their masterpiece was the Haven Project. It was the precursor to Aura, a predictive algorithm designed to manage urban resources in real time to prevent civic decay. It could anticipate power grid failures, reroute traffic before a jam occurred, even predict crime hotspots. It was revolutionary. It was also dangerous. "You're moving too fast." Alara, Julian had warned her, his voice a mixture of awe and fear. "The code is learning, adapting. We don't fully understand the emergent behaviors." "That's the beauty of it, Jules," she had countered, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "It's not just executing commands, it's evolving. We have to be bold." She trusted him. She had given him full access to her source code, her servers, her very mind. Their mentor, Arthur Sterling, a titan of the industry, had called their partnership a once-in-a-generation synergy. Arthur had encouraged her boldness, pushing her to break boundaries while counseling Julian on how to market their inevitable success. The tragedy came without warning. A subsystem of Haven, one designed to optimize emergency services, went live during a beta test. A bug in the code, a single, elegant, catastrophic flaw rerouted a fire department dispatch call. A family was trapped in a burning building. The fire trucks, guided by their flawless algorithm, were sent to the wrong address. 3 blocks away. 3 blocks that might as well have been 1,000 miles. The person who died was Caleb Thorne, Julian's younger brother, a rookie firefighter. The fallout was brutal. The university investigation focused on the reckless complexity of Alara's code. Julian, shattered by grief, testified against her. He spoke of her arrogance, her refusal to listen to his warnings, her obsession with pushing the limits without regard for the consequences. He didn't mention his full access, or his own role in pushing the project forward. Arthur Sterling, their mentor, remained disappointingly neutral, issuing a public statement about the inherent risks of disruptive innovation that implicitly sided with Julian's narrative of caution. Julian used his grief as a shield and a sword. He took the core concepts of Haven, the parts he could understand and replicate, and built his own empire. Thorne Industries. He rebranded their shared ideas as his own, sanitizing them, making them safe and profitable. The world hailed him as a responsible visionary. Alara Vance became a cautionary tale, a pariah whispered about in tech circles, the brilliant girl who flew too close to the sun and got someone killed. It took her years to claw her way back. She founded Aura on her own, a penance and a redemption. She made it open source, transparent, a direct refutation of the secrecy and ambition that had led to Haven's downfall. The award at the gala was supposed to be the final chapter of that redemption story. Instead, Julian had used it to remind her that he would never let her escape the past he had written for her. On the 4th day, the numbness receded, leaving behind the sharp, clean edge of purpose. She wasn't that broken, ostracized student anymore. She was a builder, a strategist. Julian had declared war using code. Her native language? It was a fatal mistake. She moved to her home office, a sterile white room containing nothing but a desk, a chair, and a formidable server rack humming quietly in the corner. This was her private sanctuary, air-gapped from the outside world. Julian could destroy her public life, but he couldn't touch this. She began dismantling the disaster, not with emotion, but with cold, methodical logic. She pulled the server logs from the gala, the ghost data of the attack. It was a digital masterpiece of misdirection, a maze of proxies and spoofed IP addresses designed to be untraceable. But as she unspooled the layers of deception, she found it. It was a single, elegant line of malicious code, the kill switch that had initiated the cascade failure. It was hidden deep within Aura's core programming, disguised as a redundant error-checking routine. It was brilliant. It was subtle. And it was achingly familiar. It was a modified version of an algorithm she and Julian had written together in that university lab. A piece of code they had nicknamed Janus for its two-faced nature. It could either stabilize a system or tear it apart with surgical precision. Only 2 people in the world knew it existed. This was his signature, left for her to find. It was a taunt, an arrogant declaration that he was untouchable. He believed he had broken her once before, and that she would simply break again. Alara leaned back in her chair, the glow of the monitor reflecting in her still, gray eyes. A slow, cold smile touched her lips for the first time in days. Julian was a master of narrative, of public perception. He fought his battles in boardrooms and on television. But he had chosen to fight this one in her arena. The world of pure, unforgiving logic. A world of ones and zeros, where there was no room for lies or sentiment. She opened a secure terminal, her fingers moving with renewed speed and purpose across the keyboard. Julian had built an empire on a foundation of stolen ideas and carefully constructed lies. She would not be a victim this time. She would be a system architect, and she was about to design his complete and utter collapse. Her first move was to test the cage Julian had built around her. She reached out to former colleagues, industry contacts, people she had considered friends. The responses were a uniform chorus of digital silence. Calls went to voicemail. Emails received automated replies. LinkedIn connections were quietly severed. Julian's influence was a suffocating miasma, poisoning every well she tried to draw from. He hadn't just ruined her reputation. He had effectively erased her from the professional world. Her corporate bank accounts were frozen, but for years, she had maintained a ghost account under a pseudonym, an emergency fund seeded with profits from early consulting work. It was her doomsday protocol, a relic of the paranoia she'd carried since the Haven disaster. Withdrawing the funds required a series of Byzantine security checks, a digital obstacle course she had designed herself. An hour later, she walked out of a downtown bank with a duffel bag containing enough cash to disappear or to begin a war. She chose war. Her apartment was a liability, its digital footprint too easily traced. She needed a new base of operations, a place off the grid, invisible to Julian's prying eyes. She found it in a derelict corner of Red Hook, a forgotten warehouse overlooking the gray, churning waters of the Gowanus Bay. It was a brick-and-mortar ghost, scheduled for demolition, its ownership lost in a bureaucratic tangle. It was perfect. Inside, the cavernous space smelled of rust and decay. Alara worked for 48 hours straight, transforming a corner of it into a nerve center. She ran shielded cables, set up a closed-loop network powered by a series of untraceable satellite links, and assembled a server farm from ghost components bought for cash from shady electronics shops in the city's underbelly. The result was a digital fortress, completely disconnected from her former life. But she couldn't do this alone. She needed a team, people with unique skills who, like her, had been pushed to the margins, people who had nothing left to lose and a score to settle with Julian Thorne. Her first recruit was Anya Sharma. A few years ago, Anya had been a rising star in financial journalism, a Pulitzer-nominated investigative reporter known for her relentless tenacity. Then, she had written an exposé on Thorne Industries, detailing a hostile takeover that had bankrupted a smaller competitor. Julian hadn't sued. That would have been too crude. Instead, he'd orchestrated a quiet, devastating counter-campaign. He'd had his digital mercenaries plant fabricated evidence on her laptop, leak a selectively edited personal email to her editor, and seed rumors of ethical breaches among her sources. Within a month, her career was in ashes. She was fired, discredited, and blacklisted from every major publication. Now she ran a cynical, little red blog from her cramped apartment, subsisting on freelance fact-checking gigs. Alara found her at a dimly lit bar, nursing a whiskey. Anya's eyes, once bright with ambition, were clouded with a weary cynicism. "Ilara Vance," Anya said without looking up as Alara approached. "The ghost of Galus passed. Come to give me the exclusive on your spectacular fall from grace. I don't do human interest fluff." "I'm not here to talk about my fall," Ilara said, her voice low and even. "I'm here to talk about yours. I read your original Thorn Industries piece, the one they buried. You were right about everything." Anya finally turned, a flicker of the old fire in her eyes. "Being right doesn't pay the rent. What do you want?" "Julian Thorn framed you, just like he framed me. He uses the same playbook every time: digital sabotage, public humiliation, professional isolation. I have proof he attacked me. I believe if we dig deep enough, we can find the proof he attacked you, too." "This isn't a comeback story, Vance. This is a suicide mission. Thorn owns judges, politicians, the media. You can't touch him." "I'm not going to touch him," Ilara said, her gaze steady. "I'm going to dismantle him. From the inside out. I have the technical skills. You have the investigative skills. He ruined you with lies. I'm offering you a chance to ruin him with the truth." Anya stared into her whiskey for a long moment, the amber liquid reflecting the bar's dim lights. "What's in it for me?" "Justice," Alara replied, "and the story of a lifetime." Anya drained her glass and set it down with a decisive click. "Fine. But if we go down, I get to write our obituary. It'll be scathing." The second member of her team was harder to find. She needed a hacker. Someone who could navigate the darkest corners of the web. Someone whose skills were as unconventional as her own. She found him not in a corporate security firm, but through a series of anonymous online forums. He went by the handle Daedalus, and he was a legend in the gray hat community, known for his impossible-to-trace data breaches and his philosophical musings on information freedom. After a week of careful digital courtship, exchanging encrypted messages, and solving a series of complex coding challenges he set for her, Daedalus agreed to a meeting. The location was a crowded subway platform at rush hour. Alara stood waiting, scanning the faces, expecting a hardened cyber warrior. Instead, a lanky kid approached her, no older than 19, with a shock of bright green hair, mismatched socks, and an anxious energy that seemed to make the air around him vibrate. "You're Daedalus?" Alara asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Leo," he said, avoiding eye contact and fidgeting with the strap of his messenger bag. "It's Leo. You're Nix. Right. Your encryption is like art. Seriously. It's got this fractal elegance. Most corporate code is just brute force. Ugly." Leo was a prodigy, a self-taught genius who had dropped out of MIT after one semester. Calling the curriculum stiflingly archaic, he saw systems and networks as living things, with rhythms and personalities. He had been ostracized by the formal tech world for his chaotic methods and his refusal to conform. Julian Thorn represented everything he despised: a corporate monolith that crushed innovation and prized control over creativity. Back at the warehouse, Ilara laid out the plan. It was a stark, three-pronged strategy. Phase 1: forensics, reconstruct the Gala attack, and find the digital ghost trail leading back to Thorn Industries. Phase 2: investigation. Anya would use this technical evidence to map Julian's network of corruption: the shell companies, the compromised politicians, the other corporate assassinations. Phase 3: execution. use the information they gathered to orchestrate a counterattack so precise and so public that Julian would have nowhere left to hide. Anya stared at the whiteboard, a cynical smile playing on her lips. It's a beautiful plan. It's also completely insane. Leo's eyes, however, were wide with excitement. He was already hunched over a laptop, his fingers a blur. His firewalls are good, like, really good. But they're rigid, predictable. They're built to stop an army marching through the front gate. They're not built for someone who knows how to slip through the cracks in the foundation. For weeks, the warehouse became their world. They lived on takeout, caffeine, and a shared, burning desire for retribution. Daylight was measured by the shifting patterns of dust motes in the single grimy window. Anya worked her old sources, piecing together financial records and whispered rumors, building a mosaic of Julian's crimes. Alara and Leo worked in tandem, a symphony of code. She was the architect, designing the tools and strategies. He was the ghost, slipping through Julian's defenses, his unorthodox methods bypassing security systems that would have stopped any conventional expert. They began to uncover the sheer breadth of Julian's empire. It wasn't just a corporation. It was a weapon. He had a dedicated Black Ops division within Thorn Industries, a team of digital mercenaries who specialized in corporate sabotage. They found traces of their work everywhere in the sudden collapse of a promising biotech startup, the catastrophic server failure of a rival software firm, the perfectly timed leak of a competitor's trade secrets. Julian wasn't just winning. He was methodically executing every potential challenger. He's a predator, Anya murmured one night, staring at a complex web of connections she had pinned to a corkboard. He finds a target, weakens it from the shadows. Then his public company sweeps in to buy the remains for pennies on the dollar. But the real breakthrough came from Leo. He had been probing the deepest, most secure part of Julian's network, his private, encrypted server. It was a digital fortress, protected by layers of bleeding-edge security. "I can't break it," Leo said, frustrated after days of failed attempts. "But I can listen to it. It hums. The data packets have a weird rhythm. It's not random." Alara looked over his shoulder, watching the streams of encrypted data flow across the screen. Leo was right. It wasn't a standard encryption pattern. It was a key, a melody, a piece of music they had both loved in college, a complex Bach fugue. It was a password only she would recognize. Julian had built his fortress and left her a key. Another act of supreme arrogance. He was daring her to look inside. With trembling fingers, Ilara translated the musical notes into code. The final layer of encryption dissolved. The contents of Julian Thorne's personal server, his soul, digitized and laid bare, spilled onto their screen. And within it, they found the answer, not just to how he had built his empire, but why. The server was a meticulously organized archive of a man's obsession. It contained business plans, blackmail material, and detailed surveillance on hundreds of individuals. But Alara ignored all that. Her eyes were drawn to a single, password-protected folder labeled simply Caleb. The password was the date of the Haven disaster. Inside were not corporate secrets, but Julian's personal journals, audio logs, and private correspondence from the decades since his brother's death. Leo and Anya stood back, giving her space as she delved into the heart of her enemy. The man who emerged from the files was not the one-dimensional villain she had imagined. He was a figure of profound, twisted grief. His early journal entries were raw with pain, a brother's heartbroken screams captured in text. But as the weeks turned into months, the grief began to curdle, hardening into a cold, diamond-hard certainty. She did this, he wrote, her recklessness, her ambition, her beautiful code. She built the weapon, and Caleb paid the price. The university called it a tragedy. The board called it an unforeseeable system error. They gave her a slap on the wrist and a research ban. She got away with it. She never even said she was sorry. Alara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. She remembered the aftermath, the blur of official hearings and hushed meetings. She had tried to speak to Julian, to express her own devastating sorrow and guilt, but he had refused to see her. His pain had been a fortress she could not penetrate. She scrolled further, her own memory of the events beginning to feel fragile, unreliable. Julian's narrative was so complete, so internally consistent. He had collected every piece of data from the incident, running simulations over and over again. He had isolated the single line of flawed code, her code. Arthur told me to let it go. Another entry read, he said Alara's genius was a force of nature, and sometimes nature causes disasters. He said she didn't mean for it to happen. But intent doesn't matter when my brother is dead. What matters is consequence. And she has faced none. The revelation of Arthur Sterling's involvement was a quiet, secondary shock. Her mentor, the man who had preached a doctrine of neutral innovation, had privately absolved her while publicly abandoning her. It was a small betrayal in the shadow of Julian's grand one, but it stung nonetheless. Then came the turning point. About a year after the incident, Julian's tone shifted from grief to purpose. His pain had found a new vessel, a cold, methodical quest for what he called balance. The world rewards reckless genius, he wrote in a chilling manifesto-like document. It celebrates disruption without considering the cost. Alara is a symptom of a diseased system. To fix the system, I must first correct the error she represents. I will build an empire on the very principles she despises: control, order, predictability, and I will use that empire to dismantle everything she ever tries to build. It is not revenge. It is justice. A life for a life. An empire for a career. Anya read the passage over Alara's shoulder, her journalistic cynicism giving way to a quiet awe. My God, she whispered. He's not a corporate raider. He's a zealot. He believes he's the hero of this story. Everything fell into place. The other companies he'd destroyed, they weren't random targets. His research showed that each one was led by a CEO or founder he considered a reckless innovator. An echo of Alara. He was on a crusade, systematically purging the tech world of anyone who reminded him of her. Her public humiliation at the gala wasn't just the culmination of his plan. It was a final, symbolic act of judgment. He had destroyed her creation, Aura, in a way that mirrored how he believed she had destroyed his brother through a catastrophic system failure that she was responsible for. Alara felt the ground shift beneath her. Her quest for revenge had felt so clean, so righteous. She was the wronged party, the victim of a jealous rival. But Julian's journals painted a far more complex picture. They forced her to look back at herself, at the brilliant, arrogant young woman she had been. Had she been reckless? Had her ambition blinded her to the risks in her drive to change the world? Had she forgotten the people living in it? This changes things, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It doesn't change what he did to you, Anya countered, her voice sharp. Or to me, or to dozens of others. His grief doesn't give him a license to burn the world down. She's right, Leo added, his gaze fixed on the screen. This guy's a monster. But now we know his operating system, his motivations, his fears. We can predict him. Leo was right. The revelation had not weakened her resolve, but sharpened it. This was no longer just about restoring her name or reclaiming her professional life. This was about confronting her own past, to defeat Julian, She had to defeat the ghost of the woman she used to be. She had to prove that his twisted version of justice was a lie. The final confrontation wouldn't just be about exposing his crimes. It would be about redefining the narrative of what happened a decade ago in a university lab. She turned back to the screen, her mind clear and cold again. Julian's pain was real, but he had used it to justify a decade of destruction. He had become the very thing he claimed to despise, a chaotic force that hurt innocent people. "He thinks my ambition is my greatest weakness," Alara said, a new, harder edge to her voice. "He's wrong. It's his grief. It has made him predictable. It has made him arrogant. And it's the weapon we're going to use to take him down." Their newfound knowledge of Julian's psyche gave them an edge, but it also made him more dangerous. He was a true believer, and true believers were notoriously unpredictable when cornered. The first sign that he was aware of them came not as a frontal assault, but as a subtle, insidious countermove. "Something's wrong," Anya said, her voice tight with anxiety. She was staring at her bank account online. "There's a deposit. A large one. $50,000. "From who?" Alara asked, walking over to Anya's workstation. "A shell corporation, based in Panama. One I've never heard of." Anya's face was pale. But that's not the worst part. She clicked on another window, revealing a draft of an article on her blog's server. It was an exposé on one of Thorn Industries' upcoming acquisitions, filled with confidential insider information. "I didn't write this." Leo's fingers flew across his keyboard, tracing the digital footprints. The deposit and the file were planted. He confirmed moments later. "The intrusion signature is clean. Professional. It's Julian's Black Ops team. He knows we're digging." The trap was as elegant as it was cruel. Julian hadn't attacked them directly. He had framed Anya, making it look like she was taking bribes for insider information. He was using her own past against her, creating a narrative that would not only discredit her, but send her to prison. The blow came 2 days later, as they were mapping out their final strategy. The warehouse door slammed open. A team of federal agents, armed and armored, swarmed into their makeshift headquarters. "Anya Sharma," the lead agent barked, "you're under arrest for securities fraud and conspiracy." Chaos erupted. The agents began seizing their equipment, the nerve center of their entire operation. Alara watched in horror as Anya was handcuffed, her face a mask of shocked disbelief. "This is a mistake," Anya yelled, her cynical composure finally cracking. "I've been set up." "Tell it to the judge," the agent said, unmoved. Alara's mind raced. Julian was playing chess, and he had just taken her queen. He was forcing her hand, making her choose between her mission and her ally. If she intervened, she would expose herself and their operation, confirming the very conspiracy Anya was being accused of. If she did nothing, Anya would be consumed by the legal machine Julian controlled, and Alara would lose a crucial part of her team and a piece of her own humanity. As the agents led Anya away, their eyes met. In that single glance, a universe of understanding passed between them. Anya's look was not one of betrayal or fear, but of grim determination. It said, "Don't stop. Finish it." The moment the agents were gone, leaving behind a wreckage of overturned tables and confiscated hardware, Alara made her decision. She would not abandon Anya, but she would not sacrifice the mission. Either. She would do both. "Leo, they took our primary servers," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "But they didn't find the backup core. Did they?" Leo, who had hidden under a desk during the raid, emerged, shaking but resolute. "It's shielded. Behind the wall. They missed it. But all our evidence, our tools, It's all gone. Not all of it, Ilara corrected. It's in here. She tapped her temple. And we're going to rebuild it. Faster. Better. For the next 72 hours, they worked with a frantic, desperate energy. Ilara used a significant portion of her remaining cash to hire the best white-collar defense attorney in the city. A shark named Marcus Thorne. No relation. A fact Ilara found grimly ironic, who specialized in fighting federal overreach. She fed him information through encrypted channels, pointing out the inconsistencies in the evidence against Anya, highlighting the impossibly clean digital trail that screamed of a frame job. Simultaneously, she and Leo rebuilt their digital arsenal from scratch. The raid had been a setback, but it provided them with a crucial piece of information Julian was watching. He thought he had crippled them. He would be expecting them to go to ground, to scatter. He would not be expecting them to accelerate their timeline. He made a mistake, Ilara said, her eyes burning with intensity as she coded a new attack vector. He retaliated. That means we rattled him. He's feeling pressure. And when Julian feels pressure, he gets overconfident. The date of the Thorne Industries annual shareholder meeting was in 1 week. It was Julian's coronation, a live-streamed global event where he was set to announce the largest merger in his company's history, a deal that would make him one of the most powerful men in the world. He would be on a stage, in front of the world, feeling untouchable. It was the perfect target. We have one shot at this. Leo, Ilara stated, the plan solidifying in her mind. We're not going to leak information to the press. We're not going to send an anonymous file to the SEC. We are going to take over his stage and present the evidence to his shareholders, his board of directors, and the entire world, all at once. A public execution, broadcast in high definition. Leo's eyes widened, a slow grin spreading across his face. A live-stream hijack of a Tier 1 corporate event. The security will be insane. Yes, Ilara said, and they'll be looking for a frontal assault. They won't be looking for the flaw in the catering company's scheduling software, or the vulnerability in the HVAC system's network controller, or the backdoor in the live stream provider's broadcasting code. The raid had been meant to stop them. Instead, it had focused them, distilled their mission down to a single, high-stakes moment. Julian had tried to isolate her by taking away her ally. He had failed to understand that he had only strengthened her resolve. Anya was now more than a partner. She was a symbol of all the lives Julian had casually destroyed. Ilara would not let her become another casualty. She would make her the last. The auditorium at Thorne Industries headquarters was a cathedral of modern capitalism, a cavernous space of brushed steel, black marble, and cool blue light, designed to inspire awe and insignificance in equal measure. On the stage, a massive, seamless screen displayed the Thorne Industries logo, a stylized T that resembled a sharpened spear. The room was filled with the quiet, predatory energy of immense wealth, a gathering of shareholders and media ready to witness the apotheosis of Julian Thorne. Miles away, in the grimy Red Hook warehouse, the atmosphere was one of disciplined tension. Ilara and Leo sat side by side at a long desk, surrounded by a constellation of monitors displaying everything from security camera feeds to network traffic data to the live broadcast feed itself. A small television in the corner showed a news report Anya Sharma had just been released on bail, the case against her already crumbling thanks to the evidence Ilara's lawyer had presented. It was a small victory, but it was the fuel they needed. Anya was safe. Now, it was time to burn Julian's empire to the ground. "We're in," Leo whispered, his voice hushed with reverence. He had successfully breached the event's internal network through a vulnerability in the lighting control system. I have access to audio, video, stage mechanics, everything. Stay hidden, "Leo," Alara commanded, her eyes scanning the data streams. "Don't make a move until I give the signal. The timing has to be perfect." On stage, Julian Thorne walked into the spotlight to thunderous applause. He looked radiant, a king surveying his domain. He smiled, a practiced expression of warmth and power that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you," he began, his voice smooth and resonant. "Today, we are not just celebrating a year of record profits. We are celebrating a new paradigm, a future built on stability, on strength, on the promise that responsible innovation will always triumph over reckless ambition." Alara flinched. His words were a direct echo of his journals, a public validation of his twisted crusade. He was speaking directly to her, taunting her one last time. He continued, outlining the details of the merger with Ethelred Capital, a move that would consolidate his power beyond any challenge. As he spoke, a meticulously produced presentation played on the screen behind him, filled with soaring graphs and inspiring images of progress. "The merger is the final step," Julian proclaimed, his voice rising with theatrical passion. "It will make our systems, our society, safer and more secure than ever before." "Now, Leo," Alara whispered. Leo's fingers danced across his keyboard, on the colossal screen behind Julian. The soaring graph of Thorne Industries' stock price flickered. For a split second, it was replaced by a grainy image of a university lab. Julian faltered, his rhythm broken for the first time. The technicians in the control booth scrambled, assuming it was a glitch. The image vanished, and the corporate presentation returned. Julian recovered, a slight flush of annoyance on his face. "As I was saying." "Again," Alara commanded. This time, the image that flashed on screen was a photograph of a young firefighter, smiling and full of life. Caleb Thorne. A gasp went through the audience. Julian froze completely, his polished mask cracking, the color drained from his face. "What is going on?" he hissed into his lapel microphone, turning away from the audience. "It's showtime," Leo said with a grin. He hit the final command key. The takeover was total. The corporate presentation vanished, replaced by a simple, elegant interface of Alara's design. The lights in the auditorium dimmed, focusing all attention on the screen. Julian's microphone went dead. Alara's voice, calm, clear, and amplified, filled the hall. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "My name is Alara Vance, and I would like to correct the record." What followed was a methodical, public execution, using Julian's own multi-million-dollar presentation system. Alara laid out her case with irrefutable proof. She started with the Gala attack, displaying the Janus Code, showing the world Julian's digital signature. She moved on to the network of shell corporations, displaying the laundered money trails that funded his Black Ops division. She showed evidence of his sabotage campaigns against a dozen other companies, complete with internal emails from Thorne Industries celebrating their rival's destruction. The global live stream, which technicians were desperately but unsuccessfully trying to shut down, carried every damning piece of evidence to millions of viewers. Julian stood on the stage, a statue of impotent fury. His security team was storming the control booth, but Leo had locked them out. Routing all control to their warehouse server, Julian was trapped on his own stage, a prisoner in his moment of triumph. Finally, Alara brought up the Haven Project. She displayed Julian's own journal entries, his manifesto of justice. This was never about business. Her voice explained as the audience read Julian's chilling words. It was about a personal tragedy, twisted into a decade-long vendetta. The final piece of evidence was the most critical, the original. Unaltered server logs from the Haven disaster, which Leo had unearthed from a forgotten corner of the university's archives. Alara had spent days analyzing them. Julian Thorne has spent 10 years building a narrative that my reckless genius killed his brother, Alara said, her voice softening with a trace of old sorrow. But that narrative is a lie. She highlighted the crucial data on screen. The fatal bug was not in my predictive algorithm. It was in a separate hardware interface module that connected my software to the city's dispatch system, a module that Julian himself was responsible for implementing. The final, damning piece of evidence began to load. It was the project sign-off sheet for that specific module. It would show Julian's signature, proving his direct responsibility. But, as the scanned document materialized on her monitor, a split second before it went live to the world, Alara saw something else. There were 2 signatures on the approval line. The first was Julian Thorne. The second was Arthur Sterling. Her mentor, the man who had abandoned her, who had stood by while Julian destroyed her name, the man who knew the truth the entire time and had remained silent. In that split second, with the world watching, Alara faced a choice. She could expose them both, burn down the entire corrupt structure of her past, or she could focus her justice. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. With a surgeon's precision, she digitally redacted Arthur's signature from the document, a black bar appearing over his name just as the file was broadcast to the main screen. The image of Julian's signature, stark and alone, filled the screen. The truth was out. The flaw hadn't been her recklessness. It had been his mistake, a mistake he had buried for a decade, letting her take the fall while he built an empire on a foundation of vengeance and lies. On the stage, Julian finally broke. A raw, guttural scream of denial tore from his throat. His perfectly constructed world, his righteous crusade, had been exposed as a fraud in front of the entire world. He was not a dispenser of justice. He was just a man who had made a mistake and blamed everyone but himself. The narrative he had controlled for so long was finally, irrevocably, shattered. The aftermath was a swift and brutal cleansing. The live stream went viral, becoming the most watched corporate event in history for all the wrong reasons. News helicopters swarmed the Thorne Industries headquarters, their cameras capturing the surreal image of Julian Thorne, a titan of industry, being calmly escorted from his own stage by federal agents. The market opened to a bloodbath. Thorne Industries stock flatlined, losing 98% of its value before trading was halted. The Ethelred merger was dead on arrival. In the warehouse, the adrenaline drained away, leaving a profound, quiet exhaustion. Leo was slumped in his chair, staring at a screen that showed their hijack trending #1 worldwide, a triumphant but weary smile on his face. Anya, who had watched the entire broadcast from her lawyer's office, walked in a few hours later. She said nothing, simply walked over to Alara and enveloped her in a firm, solid hug. It was the first time Alara had allowed herself to be touched in weeks. "You did it," Anya whispered. "You magnificent lunatic. You actually did it." Alara leaned into the embrace, a decade of tension finally releasing from her shoulders. "We did it." The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and media frenzy. Julian's empire was dismantled by federal regulators. His associates were indicted. The companies he had destroyed were offered restitution from his seized assets. Alara, Anya, and Leo provided anonymous testimony, their identities protected by a Justice Department eager to use the mountain of evidence they had supplied. Alara's name was cleared. The fraud charges against her publicly and emphatically dropped. She found herself in an unfamiliar position. She was a hero. Offers poured in, job offers from top tech firms, book deals, movie rights. Venture capitalists wanted to fund the relaunch of Aura. She turned them all down. Her victory over Julian had changed her. The pursuit of revenge had been a clarifying fire, burning away her old ambitions. She no longer wanted to simply rebuild what she had lost. She wanted to build something new. She thought often about her choice on that digital stage. The split-second decision to spare Arthur Sterling. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a strategic choice. A realization that her goal wasn't to burn down her entire past, but to correct the primary injustice. Exposing Arthur would have created more chaos, hurt more people, and muddied the clean narrative of Julian's guilt. It was a morally gray decision, a compromise that the old, idealistic Alara would never have made. But the woman who emerged from the ashes of her old life understood that true power wasn't about absolute purity. It was about control and precise application. She filed a petition with the courts, instead of allowing Julian's primary assets to be absorbed by competitors. She proposed a different plan. She would liquidate them and use the funds to create a new kind of entity. 6 months later, Alara stood in the center of a vast, sunlit open-plan space. The building had once been a bleak, monolithic data center owned by Thorn Industries. Now, its walls were covered in whiteboards filled with complex equations and wild ideas. The air, once chilled to preserve servers, was now warm and filled with the excited hum of conversation and the clatter of keyboards. Desks were cluttered with prototypes. 3D printers whirred in the corner, and the scent of fresh coffee hung in the air. This was the Phoenix Initiative, an incubator and haven for brilliant, unconventional minds who had been rejected by the traditional system, the very people Julian would have crushed. She had used his fortune not for destruction, but for creation. She wasn't a CEO here. She was a mentor. She moved through the space, stopping at a desk where a young woman with neon pink hair was struggling with a piece of code projected from a holographic interface. "You're trying to brute force the encryption," Alara said gently, pointing to a flaw in the logic. "But the system doesn't respond to force. It's elegant. It wants you to find the harmony in the math. Try thinking of it as a piece of music, not a lock to be broken." The young innovator's eyes lit up with understanding. She reminded Alara of herself, all those years ago, brimming with a talent that the world wasn't quite ready for. But this time, she wouldn't be alone. She would have a mentor who understood. As she turned to walk away, her phone vibrated with a message from a secure, anonymous number. She opened it. The text was brief, encrypted with a key she hadn't seen in over a decade. "You were right about Haven. He twisted the truth. And I let him. I was a coward then. I won't be again. Watch out for a company called Ethelred. They were his silent partners in more than just the merger. This is my penance." The message wasn't signed, but she knew it was from Arthur. It wasn't an apology, and it certainly wasn't forgiveness. It was a piece of actionable intelligence, a warning, a final, complex note of closure that acknowledged the messy, imperfect reality of the world. There would always be other threats, other Julians, other battles to fight. Alara closed the message, a small, knowing smile on her face. She looked out across the bustling floor of her new beginning, at the bright, hopeful faces of the future she was helping to build. The cycle of revenge was over. She had taken the fire that was meant to destroy her and used it to light 1,000 new suns. She was no longer a victim, a pariah, or an avenger. She was an architect, and she was finally free to build.